The candle on Evan's cake flickered under the cheap kitchen light. 8 years old today. Chocolate frosting smudged across his cheek. His eyes scanned the room waiting for his grandma to sing. Then she said it, loud enough to cut through the noise, through the laughter. Melissa isn't the $2,000 I send you every month enough. Why does Evan still look so thin? My hand froze mid-slice. The knife trembled just above the frosting. Everyone went silent. I turned slowly toward her. The smile I had worn tight, polite crumbled. I searched her face for a joke. She wasn't joking. The room felt suddenly too bright. The string lights above our heads buzzed like angry wasps. What money? I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. For 2 years, I haven't seen a single cent. She blinked, confused. I've sent money every month. Through Lauren. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Lauren, my sister. Sitting on the other side of the table, red wine in hand, gold earrings catching the light. She didn't flinch. I looked at her. She looked past me. You've been sending it. Through her. Yes, Grandma said, slower now. She offered to manage it. Said you were too busy with work and school. Something cold moved down my spine. My fingers gripped the cake knife harder. I hadn't even been able to buy Evan new shoes this year. He was wearing sneakers with holes in the soles. And all this time, money was supposed to be coming. I couldn't look at Lauren. I already knew. No apology, no explanation, no shame. Would you like some more cake? She asked a guest, as if nothing had happened. That moment, it broke something in me. Not just the betrayal, but how effortless it was for her. What would you do sitting at that table? Would you stay quiet for the family's sake, or would you speak finally for yourself? Where are you listening from? Have you ever been left out by your own family? I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the pull-out couch in Grandma's guest room, listening to the old radiator hiss and groan. The cake box sat on the counter untouched. Evan had fallen asleep in his party clothes, shirt stained with chocolate, one sock missing. I watched him breathe. Even in sleep, he looked tense. As if joy itself had become something too fragile to hold. My phone vibrated once. Lauren. I didn't open the message. I deleted it. That morning I woke up early. Grandma was already in the kitchen, slippers scuffing the tile. The smell of coffee filled the air, strong, bitter, familiar. I sat down slowly. She didn't speak at first, just poured 2 cups. One for her. One for me. Then she said softly, I thought you were getting the money. I shook my head. She reached across the table, placed a folded bank printout in front of me. Each line said the same $2,000 every month. For 24 months. From her account. To Lauren's. I traced the paper with my finger, then stopped halfway down the page. This one, I whispered. This was the month I skipped my insulin to pay rent. The silence thickened between us. Not angry, just heavy. That year I worked weekends at the urgent care clinic. Nights at the hospital. Evan had strep. I used a store coupon for antibiotics and borrowed gas money from Megan. Lauren, meanwhile, was on a cruise. Grandma sighed. She told me you didn't want my help, that you were proud. Independent. I felt something twist inside me. I was proud. But not stupid. I would have taken help. I begged for help, just not from Lauren. I remembered the Christmas Evan got a second-hand tablet. Lauren gave her assistant's daughter a new iPad in front of him. It's fine, Evan had whispered, trying to smile. She probably needs it more than me. That broke me in a way no argument ever could. The kitchen clock ticked loud above us. Evan stirred in the other room. I can't believe this, I said finally. I thought maybe you'd forgotten, that you were disappointed in me. Grandma looked up sharply. I was never disappointed in you, Melissa, never. I thought I was helping. I nodded slowly. I know. But it didn't fix what had happened. It didn't return those nights I cried in the shower. Or the shift I fainted from low blood sugar. Or the debt still sitting in a shoebox under my bed. I stood up to refill my coffee. The mug read World's Okayest Mom. A thrift store joke. But it hit differently now. I looked around the house. I had grown up in photos of Lauren in Paris, Lauren at award ceremonies, Lauren giving speeches. There was one photo of me high school graduation, 1999, tucked behind a ceramic rooster. I didn't need their praise. I just wanted to be seen. At work the next week, I moved like a ghost. Patients came and went. I checked vitals, changed bandages, handed out smiles, but inside I was somewhere else. Lauren texted again, "We need to talk." Then, "Let's not make this bigger than it is." Then, nothing. I didn't respond. I began checking my bank account every morning. Nothing new. Still $82.14. Grandma had promised to send future support directly. I believed her. But it didn't undo 2 years of being lied to. At home, Evan asked why we weren't going to Grandma's that Sunday. I told him we needed a quiet weekend. He nodded. He didn't press. He was used to people disappearing. We played board games on the floor. He beat me at checkers. Twice. At bedtime, he asked, "Why did Aunt Lauren say we weren't struggling?" I looked at his face in the glow of the nightlight. He deserved better than a half-truth. "Because some people only see what they want to see," I said. "Is that fair?" "No," I said softly. "It isn't." He nodded again. Then curled up, trusting me to keep the unfair world outside his door. I kissed his forehead and walked out of the room knowing I had to do something. Something real. Lauren showed up at the clinic 2 days later. She didn't call ahead. Didn't ask if I had time. She walked straight to the reception desk wearing designer sunglasses and that camel trench coat she loved too much for Ohio weather. "I need to speak with Melissa Harding," she told the front desk girl in the same tone she probably used to order lattes. I was prepping supplies in exam room 2 when my coworker knocked. Your sister's here." I didn't flinch. Didn't sigh, just nodded. Lauren followed me into the break room. She didn't sit. Just stood near the fridge, arms crossed as if she were the one being inconvenienced. "You're really doing this," she said. I looked at her, calmly. "Doing what, Lauren?" she scoffed, turning everyone against me. Making me look like some criminal. "I didn't turn anyone," I said. "You did that yourself." "I was helping," she snapped. "I paid your bills when you couldn't. I handled everything so Mom wouldn't worry. Do you have any idea what that pressure was like?" My voice didn't rise, but my hands tightened around my coffee mug. "I begged you for help. Not lies. You don't understand," she said, stepping closer. "I used the money for things that mattered. You think your little overdue bills were more important than building community programs, than raising our family's image." "Our family's image," I laughed, bitter and small. "All this time I thought I was the failure. Turns out I was just your cover. Melissa, please don't make this worse than it is." I stepped past her, opened the fridge, took out the sandwich I hadn't eaten all week. I wasn't going to cry in front of her. She didn't apologize. Not once. "Mom's really upset," she added. "She thinks you're overreacting." That stung more than it should have. "She sent the money for Evan," I said quietly. "Not for your PR campaign." Lauren tilted her head, voice low. "Be careful how you spin this. You're not as blameless as you think." And with that she left, perfume trailing behind her like a slap in the face. That night I opened my old journal. Buried between pages were notes from the hardest months. Gas money from Megan, $40. Late rent fee, $75. Groceries from food bank 3 times in 1 month. I'd tracked every hardship, every scraped together dollar. Every time I'd said no to Evan's field trips, new shoes, or birthday parties. And now I knew there was money the whole time. I sat on the floor surrounded by papers, receipts, and 3 unopened envelopes from debt collectors. And I started to write. Not just numbers this time, but truth. A record. In case I ever forgot what silence had cost me, the next week things changed. Subtle at first. My parents canceled our regular Sunday lunch. Grandma stopped texting. Evan got quiet. Then came the Facebook post. Lauren's event company shared a thank you note to donors. A collage of smiling children at a literacy event. Caption proud to support through family generosity and love. My name wasn't mentioned. But one photo stopped me cold. Evan. Sitting next to Lauren. Holding a book I never bought. Wearing a t-shirt with her company's logo. I'd never agreed to that. Never been asked. She had taken my child and made him part of her narrative. I called Grandma. She didn't answer. I texted, "Did you approve this photo of Evan?" 3 hours later, a reply I didn't know. "I'll handle it." No follow-up. Just silence. At school, Evan's teacher pulled me aside. "He seems distracted," she said. Mentioned something about people arguing at his birthday. Said he made someone cry. My chest tightened. "No one cried," I said softly. "Just a lot came to light," she nodded gently. "Just let us know if there's anything we can support." That night, I sat beside Evan at bedtime. "Do you know why Aunt Lauren isn't coming around?" he asked. I thought about lying. Or softening. But I didn't. "She made a mistake," I said. "She told some people things that weren't true, like about the money," he whispered. I blinked. "How did you know?" "I heard you and Grandma talking," he said small. "She said she wanted to help us." Why didn't we get the help? I didn't want him to feel abandoned. Didn't want him to carry the shame I had carried. "It wasn't your fault," I said. "And it wasn't mine." He stared at the ceiling. "Did she take it?" I nodded slowly. He didn't ask more. Just turned his face toward me and whispered, "I don't want to see her again." The next morning, I opened a new bank account, in my name only. No shared access, no middle hands. That same day, Grandma's name appeared in my inbox, subject correction. Inside was a PDF from her lawyer. A signed affidavit confirming she'd redirected all future support directly to me. No more via Lauren. No more assumptions. Attached was the first deposit slip. $2,000. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because of the money, but because someone finally believed me. Finally trusted me with my own life. At work, I updated my shift availability. Gave up one weekend to spend with Evan. We made pancakes together, with real blueberries. Not frozen. He smiled more. Laughed easier. Asked to go to the library with just you, Mom. Small things. But they felt like freedom. I still hadn't heard from Lauren, but I didn't need to. What would you have done? Would you confront her, forgive her, or walk away? Quietly but completely. Because sometimes walking away is the loudest thing you can do. I didn't plan to go back to my parents' house, but a week later, Grandma called and asked me to come over for Sunday dinner. Her tone was even, but I could hear something behind it, fatigue maybe. Or resolve. "I want to say a few things," she said, "and I want you to be there when I do." So I went. I brought Evan. He carried a tray of deviled eggs like it was treasure. The house looked the same. Same heavy curtains. Same faded rug where I'd done puzzles as a kid. Same wall of Lauren's achievements, polished frames in neat rows. I searched for one picture of Evan. There wasn't any. At the table, Dad poured iced tea like he was at a stranger's dinner. Mom sat stiff, her pearl necklace tighter than usual. Lauren was already there. White blouse, red lipstick, smiling too widely. "Melissa," she said like nothing had happened. "Glad you could join." I gave a polite nod. Nothing more. Evan sat beside me, quiet but observant. He clutched a cloth napkin like it might save him. Grandma brought out the roast herself, laid it down with care, then sat at the head of the table and looked around. "I'm going to talk now," she said. "And no one is going to interrupt me." Everyone froze. She reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of papers. "These are copies of every transfer I made," she said. "For 2 years I gave Lauren money to pass on to Melissa. None of it reached her." Mom opened her mouth. "Don't," Grandma warned. "I trusted you. Both of you. And you failed that trust." Lauren leaned forward. "I used some of it for things that helped all of us. My work brings visibility to." Grandma raised a hand. "Visibility doesn't feed a child. It doesn't pay rent. It doesn't replace a mother crying in her kitchen because she had to choose between groceries and gas. The room went quiet again. No one looked at me, except Evan. His eyes didn't blink. I reached under the table and squeezed his hand. I won't be sending any more money through intermediaries, Grandma continued. It goes straight to Melissa now. And I've updated my will to reflect these revelations. Dad cleared his throat. Isn't that a bit drastic? Grandma turned to him. What's drastic is watching your daughter struggle and being told she was fine. What's drastic is realizing I funded one child's spotlight while the other was fading into exhaustion. Mom's hands trembled. Melissa never said anything I did, I said softly. I asked. I begged. Lauren scoffed. You always play the victim. I turned to her. Finally. I played the role you wrote for me, I said. You needed someone invisible so you could shine brighter. She flinched, but said nothing. Evan pushed his chair back, walked to Grandma, and hugged her. I'm glad you know the truth now, he whispered. Grandma kissed his hair. I'm sorry it took so long. We left soon after. Grandma packed us leftovers. No one else said goodbye. On the drive home, Evan asked, Is it over now? I didn't know how to answer. Some things don't end clean, I told him. But we know where we stand now. He nodded. And that was enough. Back home, I opened an email from the power company past due again. I forwarded it to myself and tagged it. Proof of struggle. 2021. I had started collecting these. Not out of bitterness, but clarity. If anyone questioned my reality again, I'd have dates. Numbers. Facts. That's the thing about quiet women. We don't forget, we document. A week later, Megan pulled me aside at the clinic. Guess who came in for Botox consult? I didn't even need to guess. Let me guess. Lauren, she grinned. And guess who tried to name drop you? I sighed. She never stops. You want me to say something? No, I said. She wants a scene. I won't give it to her. Megan leaned in. But if you ever do, please let me watch. We laughed. It felt good. At night, I started sleeping better. Evan did too. We lit candles at dinner. We played Uno. We opened the windows to let in the cool April air. One evening, I caught him drawing at the kitchen table. What are you making? I asked. He held it up. A house. Labeled ours. 2 stick figures in the yard, one tall, one small. A tree with green blobs, and in the corner no Lauren allowed. I chuckled. He smiled shyly. Too much. No, I said. Just enough. Then 2 days later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name in stiff cursive. Inside a single page. Melissa, I hope you'll reconsider pushing Mom and Dad away. They're old. They won't be around forever. Do you really want to spend their last years like this? Also, I think you should talk to Grandma about changing the will back. It's what's best for the family. You don't want to be alone, do you, Elle? I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, placed it in my drawer, and lit a candle. I didn't burn it. I didn't reply. I just let it sit there quiet, heavy, meaningless. Because I wasn't afraid of being alone anymore. What scared me more was going back to who I was when I let them define me. Spring came early that year. The daffodils bloomed near the fence behind our duplex, small and bright like they didn't know they were growing from hard soil. Evan pointed at them one morning before school. See, they came back. I nodded, brushing crumbs off his backpack. They always do. Even after the coldest winters. But I didn't feel like I had come back. Not yet. There was a fog around me, soft but heavy. I moved through my routines, prepping patient charts, making dinner, folding laundry. But something inside me stayed still. It wasn't sadness. Not exactly. It was a kind of hollow quiet. Like my body had been surviving on fight mode so long it didn't know what to do with stillness. Megan noticed. You okay? She asked one Thursday after work. I was restocking gloves in the supply closet. I'm fine, I lied. She didn't push. Just handed me a protein bar and said, You forget to eat when you're pretending you're fine. That weekend, I cleaned out the hallway closet. Buried under old coats and half-working flashlights was a cardboard box labeled College, Nursing Program, 2019. Inside notes from my bridge courses. A worn-out planner with tear stains. A photo of Evan asleep at the kitchen table while I studied beside him. Also inside the acceptance letter I never showed anyone. I'd been offered a full ride to an RN to BSN program out of state. I didn't go. Lauren convinced Mom it was too much stress for the family. Mom had cried. Said she'd miss Evan. Asked me to stay close. I stayed. Got a part-time job instead. Put my dream on hold. Again. Looking at the letter now, I felt the weight of every no I'd ever said to myself in the name of family peace. I wasn't angry. I was exhausted. And I was starting to wonder if peace built on silence was peace at all. The following Monday, Grandma showed up at the clinic. Not for a visit, she'd made an appointment. Hypertension check. I took her vitals. Her blood pressure was slightly elevated but steady. You're holding a lot in, I told her. She smiled faintly. So are you. After the checkup, she reached into her bag and pulled out a file folder. I've started documenting where every dollar went, she said. In case anyone asks again. I nodded. I've started keeping a copy of everything too, for Evan. She looked at me for a long time. You always were the one who didn't ask for much. I shrugged. Didn't feel like I had the right. She touched my arm. You always had the right. You just got used to being talked over. That night I sat at my desk and opened a fresh notebook. At the top of page 1, I wrote what silence cost me. And I listed 6 missed field trips. 3 ER shifts worked while running a fever. An insulin dose skipped. $2. Oh, 0 times 24 ounce equals $48. Oh, 0. A degree deferred. A child who asked if birthdays were supposed to be quiet. Then I flipped the page. Wrote what I still have. And the list was longer. Evan. My license. My sanity. The truth, and time still enough to build a different ending. The next day Mom called. I let it ring. Then sent her to voicemail. 10 minutes later, she called again. This time I answered. Melissa, she began, voice thin. We'd like to come over this Sunday. Just for a short visit. I paused. Why a beat? To talk. I didn't answer right away. You can come, I said. But only for Evan. And we won't be discussing Grandma's will. Her voice tightened. I'm not doing this again, Mom. A long silence. Okay, she finally said. We'll bring cookies. They arrived in a rush of politeness and awkward smiles. Dad complimented Evan's haircut. Mom handed me a tin of lemon bars she used to make when I was little. Evan was cautious, but polite. He offered them juice. Then sat at the kitchen table with his sketch pad. I made small talk. Let the silence stretch when they asked how work was going. Then Mom stood suddenly. Do you remember the old lake house, she asked. The one we used to rent when you girls were little, I nodded. You loved those summers, she said softly. You and Lauren built forts out of towels and driftwood. I didn't answer. Didn't remind her that I also spent those summers babysitting Lauren while she went tubing with older kids. Didn't mention the time I burned my foot on the dock and no one noticed for 2 hours. She began, but didn't finish. And I didn't rescue her from the silence. When they left, Evan came to me. Was that okay? I pulled him close. It was what it needed to be. That night I lay in bed with the window cracked open. The wind carried the smell of grass and something else, something sharp like early summer. I thought about how easy it had been for everyone to believe I was okay. How long I had smiled through hunger, through debt, through Lauren's curated kindness, and how I wasn't interested in playing that role anymore. The next shift at the clinic started like any other. Vitals, charts, meds. Until Megan appeared in the doorway of my station holding her phone like it was something fragile. You need to see this. She said, eyes narrowed. She handed it to me. A social media post. Lauren's account. Proud to have served our community for over a decade. Family is everything, especially when you lift each other up. This week we donated $10,000 to support single mothers returning to school. A cause close to my heart. The picture Lauren in front of a giant novelty check. The caption, full of words like sacrifice, legacy, support. All in first-person voice. She never named me. But she didn't need to. She used my life as her backdrop again. My story packaged, polished. Sold to strangers who wouldn't know the difference. I handed the phone back. Megan said nothing. She just sat beside me and waited. I finally asked, is it wrong that I'm this angry? No, she said. It's wrong that it took this long. That night, I pulled out the box again. Not the one with my nursing notes. The other one labeled documents. Receipts, bank statements, emails, screenshots. Evan's medical bills. A spreadsheet of every amount Grandma sent cross-checked with Lauren's deposits and the gaps between. I printed it all. Page after page. I wasn't planning revenge. This wasn't about spectacle, it was about clarity. About telling the truth to the right people quietly but permanently. I started with Grandma. We met at her kitchen table, no fuss. No cookies. Just 2 mugs of tea and the file. She read every page. Didn't rush. When she finished, she looked up. I knew pieces of this, she said. But not all of it. I didn't want to embarrass anyone, I said. And I was tired. So tired. Her fingers rested gently on mine. You don't owe them protection anymore. We talked about next steps. She wanted to meet with her lawyer again. Wanted things in writing. Wanted to make sure no one could undo what she had set right. Then she said something I'll never forget. You're the one I trust to carry this forward, Melissa. Not because you asked for anything, but because you survived everything. That weekend, Evan and I drove to the park. Spring had burst through the branches' bright green leaves and that muddy, hopeful smell of thawed ground. He kicked a ball through wet grass. I sat on the bench with my notebook. Listened to birds. Watched a woman nearby teaching her daughter to ride a bike. Normal. Simple. Enough. Evan ran over panting. Can we get tacos for dinner? I smiled. We can get 2 kinds. He grinned. And just like that, my heart softened again. On Monday, I emailed Lauren. Subject correction, needed. Message, you do not have permission to use my story, my name, or my son's likeness in any fundraising or public campaign materials. Please confirm in writing that this will not happen again. This is not a discussion. It is a boundary. She didn't reply. But she blocked me on everything the next day. A silence that for once felt like progress. Later that week, I went back to my files. Added a new section, legacy. Not legal, just mine. Inside, I placed Evan's drawing of our house. A printed photo of us at the library. Grandma's first handwritten deposit confirmation. A note to myself. You did not imagine it. It happened. And you kept going anyway. On Saturday morning, Evan found me in the kitchen sipping coffee by the window. Mom, why did Aunt Lauren stop texting me? I took a breath. Because I asked her to. He was quiet for a moment. Then nodded. Okay, I don't mind. I reached for his hand. You get to choose who's close to you. Even if they're family. He looked relieved. Like I'd just given him a rule that made the world make more sense. That evening, I wrote in my journal. Not a list. Not a complaint. Just a sentence. I'm no longer afraid of what happens when I say no. And then on Sunday, the knock came. I wasn't expecting anyone. But I opened the door and there they were. Mom. Dad. Standing together looking smaller than I remembered. We'd like to talk, Dad said. His voice wasn't defensive. Just worn down. I'm listening, I said. But I didn't step aside. They didn't move either. We didn't know everything, Mom said. You didn't want to know, I replied. She nodded. Tears in her eyes. We were wrong, Dad added. His voice cracked. We let Lauren decide too much. Silence settled. I didn't offer comfort, didn't fill the space with words. Some things needed to sit, to sting a little. We'd still like to be part of Evan's life, Mom whispered. I considered that, then said he's watching everything. So, if you want to rebuild, start with truth. Not guilt. They nodded. And left. No promises. No performance. Just the beginning of something. Honest? Maybe. Have you ever rebuilt your boundaries brick by quiet brick? Have you had to choose between peace and performance? And finally picked yourself? Tell me below. You're not alone anymore. The following Monday I arrived at work early. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, opened my locker, and reached for my badge. Inside the locker, tucked behind a half-used box of tissues, was an envelope. No name. I opened it slowly. Inside, a printout of Lauren's newest public campaign. A glossy flyer featuring her smiling arms crossed under a headline that read, "From my family to yours, empowerment starts at home." Below it, bullet points: mentorship, legacy, advocacy for single mothers. And beneath that, a quote: "I watched someone I love struggle in silence. That's why I do what I do." I stared at the paper, then folded it, placed it gently into the trash, and pressed down hard. That evening, I sat with Grandma again. We met at her lawyer's office. A quiet building with beige walls and framed certificates. She'd asked me to attend. "This isn't about money," she said. "It's about clarity." The attorney was calm, professional. Walked us through the paperwork, updated will asset distribution, letters of intent. In her new plan, everything was clean. No more verbal promises. No more assumptions. One small trust set aside for Evan, another for my continued education, and a clause that protected the decision against contestation. Grandma signed every page without hesitation. Then turned to me. "You don't need to be in control of everything," she said, "but you deserve to know that your life is not being decided behind your back anymore." That night I cleaned the apartment. Not a tidy up. A real bone-deep clean, old papers gone. Laundry sorted. Pantries stocked for once. I opened the window and let the breeze move through the place like a reset. When Evan got home from school, he sniffed the air and said, "Smells like lemon and new." I smiled. "It's ours now, all of it." The next day, I scheduled a meeting with the financial aid advisor at the local community college. I'd been sitting on the application for 6 months. She looked over my credits. "You're 2 classes away from requalifying for the RN to BSN track," she said. "You'd be eligible for a returning adult scholarship." I nodded, breath caught somewhere in my chest. "I think I'm ready now." She smiled. "You already are." Later that week, I wrote a letter. Not to Lauren. Not to my parents, to myself. I folded it, sealed it, and placed it inside the same file where I kept Evan's drawings. It read, "You will not be erased again. You will not explain your pain to those committed to misunderstanding it. You will keep going quietly, steadily, because that is what you do." Then came the email. Subject: media request. Family Legacy Project. From a journalist who had worked with Lauren's company before. She'd heard there was more to the story. I stared at it for several minutes, then responded. "Thank you for reaching out. I'm not interested in being featured. But I am interested in making sure what's already out there is corrected. Let me know how to submit a statement." The reply came back quickly. Surprised, respectful. I sent my statement. Just 3 paragraphs. Simple, clear, no bitterness. Only facts. I ended it with one line: "Empowerment is not a photo op. It's paying your own overdue bills in the dark without anyone clapping." On Saturday, Evan and I went to the farmer's market. We bought fresh tomatoes. Real bread. A bunch of wildflowers. At the checkout, the vendor, a woman in her 50s, smiled. "Your son picked those." He nodded. "Mom likes the yellow ones." She handed me the flowers and said, quietly, "He'll remember this more than any gift you ever bought." I believed her. Back home, I opened my inbox again. There it was, the live article. Balanced. Truthful. And for the first time, my name was spelled correctly in the credits. I didn't post it, didn't share, but I printed it. Taped it to the inside of my closet door. A reminder that my version of the story mattered even if it never went viral. That afternoon, I picked up the phone and called the admissions office at the university downtown. "I'd like to schedule a campus tour," I said. "For the fall semester." The woman on the line paused. "Are you looking for undergrad or graduate placement?" I smiled. "Graduate." That evening, I pulled out Evan's bedtime book. He snuggled close. After we read, he asked Mom, "If you had a superhero name, what would it be?" I pretended to think. "Maybe. The Quiet Storm." He laughed. "Too serious." "Okay," I said. "Then maybe the Not Giving Up Lady." He nodded. "That one sounds like you." That night while he slept, I opened my laptop. Created a new document. Title: Things I Will No Longer Apologize For. The list was long, but it started with saying no. Saying yes to myself. Asking for what's mine. Letting silence speak when words aren't safe. Choosing peace over politeness. And then I wrote one more list. What comes next? Evan's birthday, this time with music and real balloons. Re-enrollment for fall. A real emergency fund. 1 day off per month just for us. Finish my degree. Delete the folder titled Proof. I won't need it forever. I closed the laptop. Lit a candle on the counter. Watched the flame flicker in the kitchen we built ourselves. Quiet. Certain. Enough. It happened quietly. No confrontation, no camera flashes. Just an inbox notification on a rainy Thursday morning. Subject: Legacy Fund. Revoked access. The trust Grandma had set up for Evan had been finalized. Legal documentation showed I was the sole guardian and manager. No joint input. No external review. Lauren's name had been removed from all mentions. It was official. On paper. Undeniable. I stared at the PDF, then closed it without printing. Not out of anger. Out of relief. Because I didn't need proof anymore. I had permanence. Later that afternoon, I stopped by Grandma's house. She was in the garden pulling weeds with gloves too big for her hands. I crouched beside her. "Do you regret any of it?" I asked. She wiped her brow. "I regret assuming silence meant peace," she said. "I thought if no one was fighting, then everything must be fine." I nodded. I used to think that too. That Sunday Lauren called. Not to apologize. To announce. She'd accepted a position with a national nonprofit. Something big. Something brand-enhancing. "I just thought you should hear it from me," she said. I sat on the couch, sunlight catching the rim of my coffee mug. "You're good at building things that look impressive," I said. She paused. "I earned this." "I don't doubt that," I replied. "I just hope someday you'll care as much about being kind as you do about being seen." Her voice went cold. "You know what? You've always resented me." I didn't argue. Didn't take the bait. I just wanted you to tell the truth. That's all. And with that, I hung up. 2 weeks later, Evan came home with a permission slip for the spring showcase. "Can you come?" he asked, hopeful. "I wouldn't miss it," I said. He smiled wide. "Even if it's just a bunch of cardboard planets, especially then." The day of the showcase, I wore a blouse that didn't have coffee stains. Braided Evan's hair myself. Packed his backpack with snacks and a note, "You shine no matter what." When we got to the school gym, parents filled the folding chairs. The hum of conversation, the smell of cheap donuts and overbrewed coffee, it all felt familiar and brand new at once. Evan stood on stage with his classmates presenting their solar system in motion project. He read his part slowly, clearly, then smiled right at me. Afterward, while everyone clapped, I felt a tap on my shoulder. "Mom." She looked older than I remembered. Or maybe just quieter. "I didn't know you'd be here," I said. She nodded. "Lauren invited me. But she didn't come." I said nothing. I read the article, she added. Her voice soft. I'm sorry. Those words. So small. But finally said, I looked at her. Not to forgive, not to rekindle, just to witness. Thank you, I said. Not more. She reached out as if to touch my arm but thought better of it, then turned and walked away. Later that evening, Evan and I stopped at a diner. He ordered pancakes for dinner. I let him. While we waited, he traced the condensation on his glass and asked why did Aunt Lauren stop coming around. I stirred my coffee. Because sometimes when people get used to being the center of everything, they don't know how to be part of something real. He thought about it. Like when someone always wants to be the sun but forgets the planets matter too. I smiled. Exactly like that. He grinned. Then I'd rather be Earth. Or Mars. I laughed. You're perfect just where you are. That night after Evan went to bed, I pulled out the box one last time. The proof folder. The statements. The screenshots. The timelines. I sat with it. Let my hands touch each page. Then I carried it outside. Set it gently in the metal fire pit on the patio. Lit a match. The flame rose quickly. Pages curled. Ashes lifted and scattered. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant, just clean. Because the truth had been told. Justice had happened not in headlines or fireworks, but in boundaries held, in voices reclaimed, in futures protected. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from Grandma. Inside was a single photograph. Evan and me sitting on her porch laughing over watermelon slices last summer. On the back she'd written, "This is the legacy that matters." I slipped the photo into my wallet. Kept it with me near the cards I used to measure worth. Now it reminded me of value, the kind that isn't deposited, stolen, or posted online. Some things never make noise when they break. A boundary, a silence, a belief. But they shift the ground forever. By June our apartment felt different. Not bigger. Not fancier, just lighter. Evan hung his spring showcase ribbon on the fridge. We bought a new rug, blue with tiny yellow stars. He said it reminded him of what comes after chaos. We named it the Legacy Rug. Every Saturday morning we'd sit on it together. Reading, drawing sometimes, just listening to music. There was nothing grand about those mornings, just sunlight through sheer curtains. The soft hum of the fan. The quiet peace of enough. I started classes again that fall, 2 nights a week after work. Evan would do homework beside me at the dining table. I'd highlight articles on nursing ethics. He'd build planets out of Play-Doh. Sometimes I'd look up and catch him watching me. Not in worry. In admiration. "Studying's cool when you do it," he once said. I laughed. "I make flashcards. That's the least cool thing ever." But still he smiled. "Yeah. But you don't give up." One afternoon after class, I ran into Lauren in the grocery store. She was alone, wearing sunglasses indoors. She reached for the same brand of almond milk. We froze. I nodded. She nodded back. No words. She moved to the next aisle. And for the first time in years, I didn't carry that moment with me. I left it there. Between shelves of cereal and non-dairy creamers. Not everything has to be resolved. Some things just have to be released. Grandma's health held steady through the summer. We visited her every other Sunday. Evan would water her plants. I'd fix the blinds that kept falling from her kitchen window. We didn't talk much about the past anymore. Not because it didn't matter, but because we both understood it now. One day, she handed me a small wooden box. "For Evan," she said. "Someday." Inside a locket with his initials, and a note. "Never forget how strong your mother is." It saved us both. At Evan's 9th birthday, he chose the theme himself. Space and tacos, he declared. So we had both. Cardboard rockets on the walls. Constellations made of string lights. A taco bar on the kitchen counter. Grandma came. So did Megan. So did my classmates from the RN program. Not everyone I had once called family showed up. And that was okay. Because this time Evan's smile didn't feel like something I had to earn. It felt like legacy in motion. That night after the guests left and Evan was asleep, I sat alone on the back steps. The night air was warm, crickets murmured, a candle flickered in a mason jar beside me. I thought about the years I spent shrinking myself, whispering my needs, swallowing my anger so others could feel comfortable. And I thought about what it meant to build a life where no one else gets to edit your story. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Soft doesn't mean submissive. Kind doesn't mean invisible. Sometimes justice is loud. And sometimes it's simply the sound of your child laughing in a room full of people who finally see you. I've stopped explaining myself. Stopped trying to win back people who mistook my silence for permission. Now I write in a new notebook. 1 page every week. Not about struggle, but about small victories. A paid bill. A full fridge. A morning without dread. A new quiz passed. Evan telling me, "You look strong today." That's how healing happens. Not all at once, but in honest, ordinary moments. One Sunday, Grandma looked at me and said, "You're the first woman in our family who broke the pattern." I didn't ask what she meant. I knew. No more silence framed as loyalty. No more letting others speak for us. No more making ourselves small so others could feel large. Evan's drawing now hangs by our front door. The same one with our little house and the tree. He added something new recently, 2 words at the top in shaky handwriting: home finally. If you've ever carried the weight of silence, if you've ever questioned your worth because others refuse to see it, if you've ever rebuilt your life one boundary, one truth, one breath at a time, tell me below. Your story matters. You are not alone. Every ending can be a new beginning. Subscribe to EN Reddit Story for more real stories of closure, justice, and quiet empowerment after 40. We are building something true. Together.